kind of sad. Okay, so and in university you studied philosophy, specifically Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah,
Um, I haven't asked you this before. I hope you don't mind. But what
yeah.
would you say your religion is now? What are your religious views?
I am a. Um, I would. That's a good question to ask because I would say I'm a heterodox Christian. So Orthodox
Okay.
Christian would be like you know the whole that'll hold to most points of the major Christian doctrines. I'm a heterodox Christian in that I have doubts about certain doctrines within Christianity that are like central to it. But in one sense, my my religious beliefs, my religious beliefs are the result of me having studied philosophy, and that is what's convinced me to stay religious. And then my heterodoxy comes from, I would say, partially from philosophy as well. So there's, I would, yeah. So I would say I'm a heterodox Christian in that sense because I know what an Orthodox Christian is because I studied it. In undergrad I did a double major. It was philosophy and biblical studies. So I studied Orthodox Christianity. So I know what an Orthodox Christian is historically. And so in in yeah, conscientiously, I can't say that I'm an Orthodox Christian because I know what it is and I know that there are things I don't hold to. Yeah. Does that
Gotcha.
answer your question? That's like a complicated way of answering your simple question.
So, so there's what you believe, and then what you do as a person who believes. What would you say you do as a heterodox Christian? Maybe it is going
Hmm.
to church once a week or
Yeah.
giving 10% of your wages away. What would you say is it that you do that other people, an anthropologist would say, yeah, he's a Christian?
Oh, that he's a Christian? Just a okay. Like sociologically, I I'm doing armchair sociology here. I would say going to mass, um, or just like Sunday services,
Mhm.
tithing. I still do. I still give tithing. I'm still heavily involved. Like the majority, not majority, a lot of my friends who are Christians, I'm still very close with them, and we have theological, philosophical debates about my beliefs, right? And what else would it be? Praying. I still pray a lot. I would say reading scripture. I still read scripture. I still read theology. So like mainly like early church fathers who were more philosophically oriented than modern day theologians. So in terms of just from an outside perspective, everything about me hasn't really changed. The way my practices, I don't think has changed. My church attendance is not as consistent as it was before. Uh, I think that's for everyone now with COVID. But other than that, like yeah, other than that, the heterodoxy would come more from if we were having a conversation about how certain doctrines work. Then I would have my doubts about it. Then I'd say, okay, well, I'll give you an example. Okay, one example that I'm extremely bearish on, to use crypto terms, extremely bearish on is the idea that people say, "Oh, what's God's will?" I gotta pray and find out what God's will, and that sort of preoccupies a lot of religious people's minds. And if you have religious friends, you've probably heard them say, "Oh, I want to know what God's will is," blah blah blah. And I'm very doubtful of that because I think a lot of that comes from people's own psychological inclinations to do certain things, and then they prescribe that as God's will, and then they do it. Now that's a very very minor quip that I have, right? It's not necessarily unorthodox to have that view, but that's just a quip that I have that has become stronger as I've thought more about it.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of bearish, let's start talking about crypto. How did you get into it? What drew you to it? And what is the promise that you think it has?
Yeah, I got into crypto in end of 2016, beginning of 2017, while I was in grad school, and I was on YouTube, and I was still sort of new in the world. I know YouTube at that point was like ancient, like it's been around for so long, but it was only at that point that I really started consuming YouTube and leveraging the content that's on YouTube for the betterment of my own soul. And I came across Vitalik Buterin, his talk at TechCrunch, which is, I think it was like 25 minutes or 20 minutes. And he's talking about Ethereum as the decentralized computer, and Naval Ravikant, I believe, was the one who introduced him. And then they had believe they had a Q&A, I think, at the end. And I'm listening to it, and I'm saying decentralized computers, and you can build stuff on it, and it, everything's verified on the blockchain, and it's very hard to, you need a certain amount of agreement inside of the Ethereum DAO to reverse certain things. And at this point, I was already super into free speech and the importance of free speech in a liberal society. And my supervisor, Mark Mercer, who is I believe
Mark's your supervisor?
Yeah, you know Mark?
He's the head of the
SAFs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I moved to Montreal, so my thesis supervisor when I was doing my BA is Andrew Irvin, and
Andrew Irvin.
He's on the committee, and he was close friends with Mark. Yeah. And so when I moved to Montreal, Andrew was like, "Hey, you should meet up with Mark." And I went over to Mark's place in Montreal, and we had what are they called? Crêpes avec like jam in them, and we just chatted. So what a small world! Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that's so cool.